Okay, folks, it's your buddy Mike Messier. We're about to go live here. Maybe we already are. Sometimes the indicator is a little bit off, so please bear with me, and we're live. So, for the pro wrestling fans out there, this is your buddy One Pro Wrestling and Sports Fan YouTube channel, Mike Messier. And I had a subscriber requested a discussion. My buddy Shane McKenna over in the Wrestling Fans Facebook group, nice group that's been going on for 5 or 6 years at least. Shane does a podcast at times as well, I believe. And Shane asked me to chime in about this CM Punk situation with AEW. And like every other wrestling fan, there's been a lot to think about lately. The Bray Wyatt unfortunate passing, Terry Funk's passing away at age 79, and this big Wembley Stadium show for All In, which kind of brings us to our point. The CM Punk Jack Perry saga continues, continuing trouble, so to speak, for CM Punk and AEW. I think there's so many things to say about this, and your comments are welcome in live time. If you happen to be checking in, feel free to comment. If you see this on the rewind, you can comment as well. My thoughts are kind of mixed. I mean, first of all, if we're all just depending on the reports of the Brian Alvarez's and the Sean Ross Sapps, uh, and the Dave Meltzers of the world, we're not backstage. We don't really know what's happening. I mean, a lot of times these reports are pretty accurate, and a lot of times they're pretty much not. So, you have to take things with not just a grain of salt, but a pound of salt. But that disclaimer aside, let's say that the story that we've all heard is pretty spot on. That Jack Perry wanted to do some spot on a Saturday night taping or a Saturday Night Live broadcast with real glass on the Collision show. Some of the veteran wrestlers kind of advised against that, saying, "Hey, look, you got to use sugar glass or prop glass to do this type of stunt." Punk was kind of brought in as a veteran. I guess maybe Jericho was not there. I think Jericho normally would be the voice of reason in AEW. Jericho's kind of the self-appointed undertaker of the locker room of AEW, and rightfully so. He's been there since the beginning, and he's the guy with the most experience, Jericho. I'm going to get to that little subtopic in a second, the Jericho-Punk dynamic. But Punk apparently told Jack Perry, "Hey, look, we don't do this on Saturday nights. We get approval if we're going to do some type of stunt." My buddy Jimmy is checking in, and Jimmy, it was funny because I was about to ask you, perhaps tonight or another night coming up, we can do this second half of our tribute show to Bray Wyatt and Terry Funk. Kind of depends on the weather. I'm in a weather situation here in Florida, as you know. Jimmy chimes in. This is Jimmy Faluca. Hi, Mikey. To me, the whole Punk thing is silly. It's confirmed he didn't instigate any of these confrontations, but he didn't handle them as well as he could have. Very good point. And yeah, I mean, Jimmy and I are often on the same page. And, we go back to, I think you have to go back a year and a half to the Adam Page semi-shoot promo that led to that AEW press conference or media scrum, as they call it so pretentiously over in AEW. And, that led to the first round of this stuff, a year and change ago, of the big backstage brawl. And that's kind of carried over into CM Punk's return. Apparently, the opportunity to have two different weekly live shows of substance, Collision and Dynamite, has kind of given almost an unofficial brand split. And, we would think that CM Punk could be on one show, the Saturday show, and everybody opposed to him could be on the Wednesday show. But apparently, Jack Perry is somewhat in between all that. I do remember that cutesy little promo that Jack Perry and CM Punk did in the ring together a couple of years ago. So I guess, they were okay with each other then. But I guess, Jack Perry, a young guy, comes from a Hollywood family. His father was a great, well-loved actor, Luke Perry. Here's a Facebook user chiming in. I firmly believe this very old saying, don't start nothing, there won't be anything. And apparently, no, not these guys, if they start anything, because I believe they want him out. And I'm assuming when you say him, uh, you're talking about CM Punk, which would make sense. Um, so, yeah, I mean, there is a feeling, at least from our fans' perspective, that, and I was there, guys, for the Cody era of AEW, like the pandemic era in Daly's place. I saw a lot of these shows live, and I can tell you, it was a very familia, as our Mexican friends say, or Spanish friends say, familia feeling for AEW. When you had Cody there and the Bucks and Moxley. And I think, some people are saying CM Punk's a cancer. I don't know if he's a cancer. I just think that they brought this guy in on an elevated platform, similar to how WCW brought Hulk Hogan in back in 1994. So if you bring a guy in like that and you kind of serve everything up to him on a silver platter and tell him how great he is, and the numbers kind of back that up, that, I mean, the second showing of the Friday night show, the ratings were really high when CM Punk came back. And then the pay-per-view rates, I believe, went a bit higher too, didn't they? When CM Punk fought Darby Allin and then he won the title from Hangman Page eventually. So it's not like CM Punk doesn't have an argument, or his defenders have an argument to say that he's positively affected the wrestling business, or at least the AEW wrestling business. He does have an argument to do that. So I just feel like we can't dismiss CM Punk's contributions to AEW. At the same time, they did have a television show before he was even on there. Jimmy Fluke, if you're still around, I'm going to send you an invite to come on here if you have time, if you're able to put your laptop in position. So to me, I wouldn't say it's much ado about nothing. I think everybody's got a point here. I think AEW, the guys like Jack Perry and the guys, maybe like the Young Bucks and so forth, they are feeling that they're being infringed upon, that as original AEW wrestlers, the foundation of the company, that they're not being respected by CM Punk. And CM Punk feels that as a veteran of pro wrestling in general, he's not being respected. So when you have that type of dynamic, that's not good. Now, as far as who's at fault and who's not, I think it's one of these deals where, as fans, and even these guys that claim to be experts, the Sean Ross Stapps and the Meltzers and the Alvarezes, like I said, there's so many. If you've ever worked on a film set, or even an office job, or if you work in a hospital, that there's so many dynamics. The day-to-day working with other people can be really tough. And when you have bosses and you have employees and you have coworkers, the dynamics can be very complicated. And it's not always a black and white situation. This guy's the good guy. This guy's the bad guy. A lot of times it's just personalities, conflicts. Some people get along with each other and some people don't. And to try and put it all on one party, I think is inaccurate. However, on the flip side of that, if you really want to be honest about it, we've seen CM Punk have situations in the WWE, between him and Triple H, and the whole thing with the podcast with Colt Cabana, his relationship, talking about CM Punk's relationship with Colt Cabana kind of went to shit. So we do see that there's a lot of times when CM Punk is in the middle of something, and something that's not quite good. And so with that in mind, it would lend us to think that this is all CM Punk's fault. And it very well might be a good portion of his fault. So what happens next? What do you do from here? Well, first of all, I think that the solution that Tony Khan might have, and he's an interesting part of this because I think he's been an enabler. If we're going to go with the story that we've heard, the thing for Tony Khan to do is he really has to make a stand. And I think, unfortunately for everybody, the stand might very well be to suspend or even fire or break, business with CM Punk immediately. However, the timing is horrible because the timing is coming up on this pay-per-view, which I believe is this weekend. I think it's either this Saturday or Sunday in Chicago. And this is the all-out pay-per-view. This has kind of become the signature show in Chicago. And part of that signature is that CM Punk is on these shows. And I think for them to try and do a pay-per-view, do a major show in Chicago without CM Punk, you're basically just inviting the 1991 Great American Bash in Baltimore. And if the longtime wrestling fans know what I mean, but for the younger people, I'll explain. The 1991 Great American Bash was the WCW pay-per-view after they had just stopped doing business with Ric Flair. And Ric Flair was the world champion. And, at that time, it was kind of unprecedented that a world champion would go over to the opposition and so forth. So, it's just one of those deals. If Jimmy's still around or the other, if you want to chime in, I'm going to put the invite right there in the chat on this. I was trying to put it on Jimmy's Facebook page, but it wasn't working. So just click copy and paste that URL, Jimmy, if you want to hop in. So go to the chat in this live stream. For CM Punk to be in AEW, for him, he feels like he's doing them a favor. For AEW, they seem to feel like they don't need that favor or they don't want it. And when I say AEW, I mean the Jack Perrys, the Young Bucks, maybe the Kenny Omegas. They're the ones, for better or for worse. And these are not some of my favorite wrestlers. You know that I'm not a fan of the super kicks, 20 super kicks a match. I'm not a fan of wrestling dolls in Japan. But when you realize that the Kennys and the Young Bucks have put their time in, and I'm talking about the 2019, the 2020, the 2021, when things were not so good. And this company was only 5 or 6 months into their weekly Dynamite show, and they got the rug pulled out from them. They had to do all the shows from Daly's Place, and then Brody Lee passed away. So I mean, these guys have all been through a lot with each other, and that's before guys like CM Punk and Daniel Bryan came in, or Bryan Danielson, and started taking some of those main event spots and presumably main event paychecks if there's any pay discrepancy. I can see their frustration too. And I think the difference with Punk and, say, a Daniel Bryan is, and even a John Moxley, who's actually been there from the beginning, but those guys haven't seemed to have any real issues with anybody. And I don't know if CM Punk could really make a case that he's a bigger star than a Bryan Danielson or even a Chris Jericho. Now, let me get into this Chris Jericho subtopic. Chris Jericho has really positioned himself, and he fancies himself as the Undertaker of AEW. And I found that to be, we have a nice comment here on another topic, which this is a great question. So I'm going to get into this NWA question. I like that question. Thank you. Let me get into that in a minute. But I think Jericho kind of positioned himself as the self-proclaimed Undertaker of the AEW locker room. He loves that spot. He loves to be able to work with guys like Orange Cassidy, even that high-flying guy a couple of months ago. I don't even know if that guy is still around, that Jericho wrestled on TV. But Jericho loves putting these younger guys into a big-time spot, helping them get an opportunity. And a lot of times he loses. A lot of times Jericho takes the L. We haven't seen Punk take the L too many times. He did that one time against Moxley on TV, but that was kind of just 50-50 booking. That was the first half of a 50-50 booking. And my buddy Carl's chiming in. Hey, Carl, how's it going, buddy? Carl and I are overdue to do a video together. I haven't forgotten about you, Carl. Just the timing's been off. But Carl's got his YouTube channel over there as well. So I feel that Jericho might have some influence in this that hasn't been spoken of. I think him and Punk have kind of a terse relationship. When Punk left the WWE for a few years and Jericho was doing his podcast, Jericho often talked about he had reached out to Punk, and Punk wasn't necessarily returning the calls. And I think Punk kind of took exception to that. Like Punk didn't always respond very favorably to Jericho. So there's some tension there, and it's interesting to me that, unless I'm forgetting something, I don't think we've seen any CM Punk Chris Jericho interaction in AEW, which I thought might have been the first thing they did. I thought maybe that would be the first promotion or the first angle for CM Punk was to do something with Jericho, but they never did that, unless I'm forgetting something. Now let's get into this. And you got to remember, Tony Khan's favorite wrestler growing up was Chris Jericho. I mean, Tony Khan tells that famous story of him going to CyberSlam 95 or some such thing, and Jericho was wrestling, defending his TV title there and so forth back in the 90s when Tony was just a fan. So that kind of planted the seed. So, I mean, you can see that Tony Khan, if he has these loyalties, and you got to remember, and no offense to Tony Khan, but I often think of him as the Richie Rich kid playing with his action figures, and instead of just the 6-inch action figures like we have, maybe this is a bad example, but this is our buddy Brody Lee here, but instead of these 6-inch action figures, Tony has access to real live human beings. He has his 6-foot tall action figures, or in AEW's case, 5'8". So he's got his Chris Jerichos, he's got his CM Punks, he's got his Young Bucks, and he gets to put these action figure human beings into all these different situations. And I think that as a billionaire, what else would you want to do? You know what I mean? It's fun for him to do such a thing. And I think when he sees some of his action figures showing signs of humanity, and they're not just there to get a paycheck, and even though they're wrestling a very, very limited schedule, I mean, AEW guys wrestle at the most 2 or 3 or 4 times a month, I would say, as opposed to the 2 or 3 or 4 times a weekend that Flair and Harley Race and those guys wrestled. So some of these guys are basically spoiled, by wrestling standards. I'm not saying that they don't take their bumps. I'm not saying they don't work hard and leave it all in the ring, but they're not going to the ring as much as the guys from the past. And some wrestlers, like the tag team of FTR, and I think CM Punk sees himself this way. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But some of these guys are respectful to their wrestling ancestors, and some are not. So Tony's in a tough spot. I think he's kind of, people call him a money mark and so forth. But I don't think it's that. I just think that he loves the wrestling business. Tony Khan loves wrestlers. But, if you want to compete with Vince, I guess, I hate to say it, but sometimes you have to be a little Vince-like, Vince McMahon Jr.-like in your presence. You have to be the boss. And it's not always fun to be the boss. It's not always fun to be the bad cop. I think that's what Tony Khan if he hasn't learned it by now, he better teach himself, or somebody better teach him pretty quick, because he can keep pumping money into this thing. I mean, Wembley Stadium showed that he can make money with AEW, but the headache, the heartache, and if things like this are allowed to continue, you could have a situation where there's some type of lawsuit. Like say Jack Perry, I'm just making something up here, but say Jack Perry went nuts and grabbed a piece of broken glass and charged after CM Punk. I mean, just some nightmare, Puerto Rican scenario like Invader 1 and Bruiser Brody. But say like these tempers get out of control, it's not worth it for a guy who could be doing other things. A lot of times I wonder what the motivation is for Tony Khan to even do this wrestling business. I guess he just loves wrestling and this is his opportunity to put his stamp on it. But if you look at some of the headaches he's gotten from this thing, you have to give him credit as a wrestling fan that he even sticks with it, because some of these guys are kind of hard to deal with. I don't know if I have anything else to say about it. I mean, I guess we can all speculate where this is going to go. I mean, if I were to speculate of anything, I mean, I think you could just cut CM Punk out. I mean, the story that we're hearing now is that when Jack Perry and CM Punk had their little entanglement, and not in the Will Smith type of way or the Jada Pinkett type of way, when they had their entanglement backstage and this monitor apparently fell on Tony Khan or something fell on Tony Khan, maybe that was like the wake-up call he needed. Like, here we are in Wembley Stadium, we've got 80,000 fans here, and I'm dealing with these assholes, and what am I doing with my life? Maybe Tony had one of these existential moments, and if he really wants to just, as some of the fans are saying, cut the cancer out of AEW, the easiest thing to do with really not much repercussion is just to let go of CM Punk. And the real world title thing, I don't like that anyway. I mean, it's kind of funny because it's a flashback to that 91, Great American Bash, Luger and Wyndham, but over in the WWF, starting with SummerSlam 91, Bobby Heenan and Ric Flair bringing the Real World's Championship over to the WWF at the time. So it's kind of funny you have like kind of that same old storyline with CM Punk with his quote Real World title over in AEW. And I think that's a storyline that's really just going nowhere. And I mean, I think it is going somewhere. It's going right back to CM Punk versus MJF, with MJF as the babyface and CM Punk as the heel. And but once you're done with that, which is very predictable, that's going to happen. Where do you go with a guy like CM Punk? I mean, if you're going to keep putting him over, and the story being that the way that CM Punk and his defenders would say that CM Punk, when he wrestles guys, like a powerhouse Hobbs, and Punk wins the match, but somehow he gets Hobbs more over just because he gave him the rub, brother. That's kind of Hulk Hogan-esque thinking in my book. So let's get to this question. Do you think Corgan is dropping the ball with the NWA? Well, okay, multi-task question. First off, I have been an NWA fan. They had 1 year where I could get all the 4 pay-per-views and the weekly show on Fight for $50. I had that. I didn't renew when I could have, and I think the window shut on me. So I haven't really, the last time I really saw NWA was in person at the Tampa Nuff Said. I mean, I actually went out of my way. I got an Airbnb in Tampa. You remember, Florida is such a big state. So I got an Airbnb in Tampa for that weekend. I went to the Nuff Said pay-per-view. It was Tyrus against Matt Cardona, and you had a bunch of other stuff. I really got into the women's tag team title match, believe it or not. Pretty Empowered has become a big favorite of mine. I know that they've kind of added a member, and Kelsey, I believe her name is, Kelsey Page or something like that, has become a singles wrestler and so forth. So NWA wrestling, I believe, does have value. It does have kind of an old-time feel to it, which I like. Sometimes it feels a little too old-time. Sometimes the pace is a little slow. Some of the people, there's that backstage interviewer lady with all the tattoos who, she seems to be trying her best, but I just don't think she's very good at her job. And she has like that, late 90s, mid 2000s Los Angeles look, like the plastic accoutrements and the big hair and the tattoos, and basically looks like someone that Billy Corgan would have met in his travels in Los Angeles. I did see this interesting movie yesterday, guys. Author, the J.K. Leroy story, and Billy Corgan has a part in that. It's a documentary. But anyway, Billy Corgan is a really nice guy from all indications. I did have a little Messier moment with him at the NWA Nuff Said pay-per-view. I spoke to him for maybe 30 seconds. Nice guy. Javier is agreeing with me, which I always appreciate. Javier is my good friend who He does some wrestling writing. If you want to promote yourself, Javier, you can leave the link to one of your latest articles. I always like Javier's writing. Fan of Pretty Empowered too. Yeah, the interview lady for the NWA is a bore. Guys, if you could, let me know how this audio is doing. I got this new headset the other day. I do like the headset thing. I don't like having the big microphone all over the fucking place. Let me know if this headset's working for you. So do I think Billy is dropping the ball? I think Billy is carrying the ball. I mean, I think Billy's the only one that has really done anything for the NWA. I mean, if you take a look at the NWA now, as opposed to say 2011, 2015. I mean, for years, the only real NWA aspect that had a pulse was NWA Hollywood. And if you happen to live in Hollywood, California or Los Angeles, California, you could see the NWA Hollywood do shows out of a studio. I was actually there for a 4-hour taping. Willie Mack was there. Interestingly enough, Joey Ryan and Melina, not Melina, the lady that played the vampire wrestler lady. They were in the audience. Colt Cabana was there. The late great Paul Bearer in his Percy Pringle gimmick was there. This is all NWA Hollywood. My point is that the National Wrestling Alliance, with the exception of NWA Hollywood, was really dead, until Billy Corgan, after some type of problems with Impact Wrestling, some type of litigation I think he had with Impact or Dixie Carter or some such thing. Billy Corgan decides to go ahead and buy the rights to the National Wrestling Alliance. And then we start seeing the 10 Pounds of Gold series with Nick Aldis and guy's name is Matt Storm, I believe, who was like 52 or 53 years old at the time. He was the champion. And they started making this NWA thing something that meant something again. And it was really because of the online series, the 10 Pounds of Gold. And then, speaking, all things go back to All In, because the original All In, a lot of people forget that really the marquee match was Nick Aldis versus Cody Rhodes, or Cody. And funny enough, that if you're talking about, fulfilling the destiny or finishing the story that Cody Rhodes always, narrates in the WWF or the WWE about defeating Roman Reigns for the WWE title. I mean, basically that's a copy and paste and a delete a couple of words from what he did with Nick Aldis in the NWA. So if you ask me, is Billy Corgan dropping the ball? He might be dropping the ball, but he's the only one that's picked it up in the first place. And I do think there's this as a positive, because I do really hope the best for the NWA. The fact that they've got EC3 as a champion, I think that's a good thing. And it's no offense to Tyrus, but having gone to that Nuff Said pay-per-view, which is basically named for, I believe, Tyrus's expression, Nuff Said, I just don't think, no offense, but I think Tyrus had the belt because Nick Aldis was leaving the company. Tyrus is on the Fox News as a talking head every week, and before he had the NWA World title, what did he have? Was it the national title that he was always carry on those shows? And so for Billy, that was just free exposure, free advertising. I'm not sure how much it carried over. I'm not sure how many people were watching Fox News or the Fox talking heads with Tyrus and then said, oh my God, I got to go watch this guy wrestle. I mean, maybe a few thousand people, maybe not. But I just don't think that Tyrus, no offense to him, but Tyrus around 50 years old, big guy, but not, I mean, if you look at a guy like Crusher Blackwell from the 80s, or even, Van Vader, Big Van Vader, big guys like that could actually move and carry their weight. And no offense to Tyrus, I never saw him anywhere close to the league of a Big Van Vader, a 1992 Big Van Vader, or a 1993 Big Van Vader, or a 1983 or 84 Crusher Blackwell. Tyrus, I'm not trying to pick on him, but I guess I will. He just looked hurt. He looked stiff, like stiff, and as in his body was stiff. Not that he was a stiff guy hurting people, but just didn't look like he was very comfortable anymore wrestling Tyrus. And he does have a presence. I'll give him that. But I just didn't feel like he was a put asses in seats type of guy. Now, EC3, I think the thing that's going to work for him as champion, if it does work, he's going to have some good challengers, and I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I mean, they have that kind of interesting redneck guy, the hillbilly wrestler guy who likes to juice. He likes to bleed, and he's got kind of the cross-dressing or the transgender valet. I mean, and that's very contemporary. I mean, it's kind of an interesting gimmick, but I think for our time, this hillbilly wrestler who kind of taps into that, revival of hillbilly, culture in our country. I mean, the number one song now is that Northman from the Red Man or whatever the fuck. So I mean, people kind of have a soft spot for like hillbillies or wise hillbillies or wise rednecks. Like that's in fashion these days. So I think they call them the Thrillbilly Deluxe. Am I thinking of the right guy, Javier? Let me know. Let me know how this audio is doing as well. And if anyone wants to jump in, check the chat on this thing. I put the fucking StreamYard link in there. But in any event, challengers. You're going to need some challengers for EC3. And who do they have to challenge this guy? I mean, I'm really trying to think here. I mean, I think the best case scenario, and I don't know if that's going to happen, is Nick Aldis. If they can dust off the relationship and kind of kiss and make up with our buddy Billy Corgan and Nick Aldis. But you know what? That might be kind of played out itself. I mean, I'm thinking like they need someone like a Sting, to be honest with you. Like not a 62-year-old Sting, but they need like a 32-year-old Sting. They need like a 1988 Sting or a 1988 Ultimate Warrior. Someone who's got some youth. And I think EC3 can be a very viable champion, but I think he's got to have somebody chase him for this thing. And off the top of my head, I really just don't know who that would be. I mean, I'm kind of thinking of Ricky Morton's son. I mean, Kenny Morton, but he's kind of in the junior heavyweight division. The guy is pretty young. I mean, I think it might be interesting if they turn Cardona babyface, if they can have Cardona go against EC3. But it looks like Cardona might have his sights back on WWE. His wife is there. I mean, she's very pretty, Chelsea Green. So I can see Cardona trying to get his way back into the mothership, so to speak. Funkasaurus Brodus Clay was sort of fun. Tyrus does have a presence, but so many others could carry that belt. Well, he's lost the belt to EC3, and that was just at their most recent pay-per-view. So I'm going to look up I want to see if I can find the NWA website real quick and see if we can find a challenger for this guy. I did watch his interview on Fox the other night, and he kind of his goodbye interview. And I'm not sure, let's see. Sound is okay, but sometimes choppy. But that might be your not yeah. Okay, thanks, buddy. Fair enough. Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate because the last headset I was using was also kind of like okay, but sometimes choppy. So I don't know. Does it help if I put it closer to my face, or did that help? I can put this volume up. Is this helping or is this hurting? Let me know. Let me know now, buddy. I put the volume up and I put the microphone closer. So NWA National Wrestling Alliance.com. Okay, that's the website. Let me see if they have a roster page. Oh God. And I know that they just did Tom Latimer. He might be pretty good. But Latimer is in that position where like his wife is more over than he is. The women's champion Camille, she's over. The Country Gentleman is that what I was talking about? Chris Adonis, who's formerly of WWE, Chris Masters, Natalia Markova, she's very pretty. I mean, they have a very good women's division, to be honest. The Thrillbilly Silas Mason. I mean, I think he's the guy that I was talking about with the transgender or the cross-dressing valet. I think he could be really a good challenger for EC3, but I don't know if he necessarily has to win the title from him. Aaron Stevens, that's the former Damian Sandow. I don't know if he's really a world champion type, but he's decent. They've got Murdoch, Trevor Murdoch on here. Vampiro, he's got to be 60 years old. And that's not even an insult. It's just a fact. I'm not really seeing anybody, guys, to be honest with you. I'm looking at their roster page. Colby Carino is good, but he's more like a junior heavyweight size. Max the Impaler is kind of their, androgynous, or what's the term? Non-binary competitor, Max the Impaler. Rolando Freeman's funny, but he's kind of a comedy guy. I'm just not seeing much. I'm really not, as far as who can challenge EC3. Let's see. They're coming to West Palm Beach, Florida, Saturday. Well, they already did, August 19th. And they just did Tampa, Florida, August 20th. So I guess I just missed a couple of these things. And so I just missed a bunch of dates that they were in Florida. So I missed them again. Oh, well. So I don't know, guys. I mean, to answer the question, I don't think he's dropping the ball. I just think it's a slippery ball to hold, if that makes any sense. Basically, what can you say there, buddy? I mean, he's the only one that really cared enough to put this thing together, this National Wrestling Alliance, and he's the only guy that's put money and time into it. So, I mean, I don't think we can fault Billy. I just think it's between WWE, AEW, the ghost of Impact Wrestling, whatever Impact Wrestling is now. You still have the whole world of MMA to compete with in some degree. You have bare knuckle fighting. You have slap fighting. You have so many things that if you're into what we're into, combat sports or, ring sports, whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of choices now. And I just think that the NWA is doing the best that they can. And could they be doing better? Sure. I mean, but, what do you want from the guy? I don't know. I hope I answered your question, or at least gave my thoughts on it. I guess the answer is no. I don't think he's letting the ball slip through his fingers. I just think it is what it is. It's a struggling promotion, but at least it's struggling. At least it's not dead. Okay, guys, I think that's about it. I think I've covered all these topics. I will be looking to, if Javier wants to do a podcast with me at any point, I welcome that. And my buddy there, Carl, and I are always looking to do something. And Jimmy and I are going to finish our two-pointer, our two-system tribute there to Bray Wyatt and Terry Funk at some point. Okay, guys, thanks for watching. MikeMessier.com. I got my pro wrestling trivia book. If you want to, you can read the first 3 chapters for free over on Amazon Kindle. You don't need a Kindle to play. Just go look for Mike Messier Pro Wrestling Trivia. My book, Fight or Play Basketball. My other book, A Distance from Avalon. I also published the book Bad Girls with Good Tattoos for you, steampunk or grindhouse fans. Women's empowerment book. That's it, guys. All right, man. If you're in Florida like I am, so far so good. No storm has killed me yet, but we'll see. And have a great day, everybody. Keep watching me and keep watching wrestling. Okay, have a good one, guys.